When I think of Playboi Carti, I don't imagine a person. What immediately comes to my mind is a tall, skinny figure silhouetted by the flashing lights of the stage behind him, while the entire world shakes with thousands of people jumping and screaming in front of him. He doesn't change his appearances, he changes his shapes, either appearing as a skinny, demented rock star or a baggy, oversized beast whose face is hidden deep in the shadows of his clothes. He screams and contorts and raises the passions of the crowd into a nightmarish fever pitch of noise without ever saying a word. He conducts the symphony of chaos, presiding over a writhing pile of bodies, throwing themselves into the violence over and over again until they're dragged unconscious from the pit. Going to a Playboi Carti concert is risky, but people love it, and they pay to go over and over again. And there are almost no other artists in the world today with the same spirit and the same fan base as him. Playboi Carti is a modern phenomenon in a world of boring, overly sanitized music. Music needs Playboi Carti. He's one of the most interesting characters in the industry, but it seems like at this point, he doesn't need music. He's created a persona that transcends anything he could ever make or say. He's a living legend. And this is the story of Playboi Carti.
What do you want, more than anything?
I want to make an impact.
Everyone wants to make an impact, but not everyone knows how to get it. You have to go outside. You have to speak your mind.
I started Volksgeist as a way to talk about the idea of taking action and changing the world through hard work by telling the stories of people who are doing exactly that. Now I'm making my own creations, my own brand, my own art to continue that mission, because you aren't going to get lucky. You aren't going to blow up overnight. That's why I wear my pendants every single day. The hand-painted morning sun rising over a sea of silver stars reminds me that I have to keep going no matter what. We're all sitting here watching videos about successful artists. We're watching videos about people who make music that changes the world. Because I want to motivate all of you to pursue your own dreams and never give up. This necklace is a symbol of that belief. There is no success without failure. There is no light without dark. All I want is to remind you that the only thing crazier than trying your hardest is to never try at all. So dream big. It doesn't matter who you are, a rapper, producer, a photographer, a student, a writer. The sun rises every day. The darkest night and the brightest day is a 925 sterling silver necklace with a handmade enamel design in the shape of a sun rising over a night full of silver stars. And here's a reward for taking action. The first order after this video goes live gets a full refund, and the first 10 get 10% off after ordering. All orders get free shipping in the United States. And thank you for supporting my projects. Jordan Terrell Carter is one of the most unique figures in modern music. In the past 5 years, he's created a completely unique blend of trap, cloud rap, and punk rock, and eventually helping the rise of rage music at the same time. So it's no surprise that he was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, the city that gave birth to a large majority of boundary-pushing rap artists from the last 10 or 15 years. Even though as the years have gone by, he's drifted further and further away from their sounds and imagery to the point where if you just found out about him recently, you wouldn't know where he was from at all. And in the same way, Playboi Carti doesn't have a backstory like a lot of other artists would. He was born in September 1996 in Atlanta, but his introverted personality and quiet persona means that we just don't know too much about his early life. The first real stories about Carti are from around the time he started making music as a teenager in the early 2010s. In 2017, he talked with Vogue about how as a teenager, he was always trying new clothing styles, and one of the biggest ones that he got made fun of for was colored skinny jeans in the early 2010s. Later, in a 2020 interview with GQ, he told the story of the time he realized he needed to take music seriously after having it as a hobby since he was a kid. While working at H&M as a teenager, long before he ever released the music that would later make him a star, a customer came up to him and told him that they loved his SoundCloud mixtapes while he was folding clothes in the store. And in his words, "I had to quit H&M 2 or 3 days later." An experience like that could be both humbling and encouraging at the same time. For Carti, it was just what he needed to push him to fully chase his dreams of being an artist. Shortly after the H&M incident, Carti decided to move to New York City and take his music career as seriously as he possibly could. But before that, let's talk about the music that got him noticed in the first place. Around this time, Carti had put out a few different mixtapes under the name Sir Cartier, and his aesthetic at the time was pretty different than it is now. While his first mixtape, The High Chronicles, isn't publicly available on the internet anymore at all, his second mixtape, called Young Misfit, is from 2012, when he was 16, and you can find it on YouTube. I think it's honestly a pretty good project, and it shows that Carti had a ton of potential to evolve his techniques and grow as an artist. He had already figured out the ad-lib style that made him famous, but there are probably more lyrics on here than the rest of his projects combined. At the same time, the beat selection is pretty good, and he was a good rapper already. There are tons of pretty funny lines about living in a cemetery and getting head from zombie girls and things like that that hint at the creative path he would later go down.
Graveyard, my residence. Zombie bras, give me neck and shit. Pulled off with the top bar. Let the smoke clear.
The intro track 36 Villains is a pretty catchy song, and it's probably my favorite from him.
Black Ninja, my niggas take time off your clock with the Glock. Purple killing that fool. I smoke dolo by two. Got me high to the roof. Got your bitch getting loose.
To this day, the mixtape only has 68,000 views on YouTube. So if you want to hear some Playboi Carti that almost no one else has heard before, you should definitely check it out. Carti's first song that really made waves and made him a somebody was his track Broke Boy that went viral on SoundCloud in 2015, introducing to the world the abstract, high-pitched, ad-libbed style of rapping that would quickly turn him into a star.
Broke boy, broke boy, broke boy, broke boy, broke boy, broke boy, broke boy. Hey, why should I keep jugging all these broke boys in the mall buying ice 'cause he a broke boy?
At the same time, Carti left Atlanta around 2015 to go to New York City and stay with some family to try and find more opportunities for his music. And it didn't take long before success started coming his way. He wasn't a nobody. He already had a few internet hits, and he started to meet and work with influential people pretty quickly. He already had a bunch of features on songs from underground artists like Lil Yachty and Lil Uzi, but the connections he found in New York would take him to a whole other level. After meeting A$AP Rocky at a party and showing him his music, it was only uphill from there. In 2016, he scored a major feature on the song Telephone Calls from the A$AP Mob Cozy Tape Volume 1. The track featured Tyler the Creator, A$AP Rocky, and Playboi Carti, and it ended up being far and away the most successful song from that mixtape.
I got money bag, I'ma bag your bitch, I'ma buy your bitch. Money bag, I'ma cash shit, I'ma cash shit. Cash bag, cash card, bitch, cash card, bitch.
Shortly after, A$AP Rocky signed Carti to AWGE and brokered a record deal with Interscope to make him a major label artist. Up until this point, Playboi Carti had been a pretty mysterious figure. Not a lot of people knew about him, and for those who did, he wasn't exactly seen as a rising star. He didn't say a lot, and he didn't put out a lot of music, but still, he was gathering experience and social media clout that would later turn him into one of the most talked about artists in the world. Even though no one knew who he was seen in public a lot with a lot of very important people, and his name was starting to grow. 2017 was the first huge year for Carti's music. He dropped 3 singles that all did huge numbers, with Magnolia peaking at number 29 on the charts and Wokeuplikethis peaking at 76. The industry loved him. He got onto the 2017 XXL Freshman list, his self-titled mixtape hit number 12 on the Billboard charts, and he opened for Gucci Mane on a national tour.
And I shoot that up, and I'm on the block, and I'm on the block. In New York, I'm in Lee Rock, hiding in my sock, selling every rock.
He featured again on a song that would go on to become one of A$AP Mob's most popular tracks, and A$AP Rocky brought him along to ad-lib on a Lana Del Rey song in a huge pop hip-hop crossover that did major streaming numbers.
She prayed to God I made it, but banking like my Franklin. My neighbors start to hating. What?
David Knight.
Huh?
We be nice.
Hey, slide inside it, Diddy boppin', Melly rockin'.
But a lot of people hated Playboi Carti. I don't just mean he had haters. He had an army of haters. People did not accept Playboi Carti as a rapper. It's almost hard to understand the hate for Carti when you look back now, because he's been so influential that he now has artists who copy him when back in the day he was completely out of left field and no one knew what to make of his sound. The reaction that most people had when Playboi Carti burst onto the scene was hatred. People said, "Does this guy have any talent at all?" That's the type of comment you'll find all over Carti's songs from early in his career. Because while he sounds familiar now, his sound was basically unprecedented back when he was starting out. Because Carti didn't sound at all like other rappers from Atlanta, like Young Thug and Future, who were already pushing boundaries with their abstract styles. And he really didn't sound like a classic rapper at all. Carti's sound was minimalistic. He wasn't writing long rhyme schemes with complex themes and storytelling. He was following his own vision from the start. He was ahead of his time, and naturally, there were just as many people who hated him and wanted him gone as there were fans who were looking forward to his next project. But Carti kept growing anyway, and it became clear that his style represented the evolution of music happening before our very eyes. At the same time as people complained that he was a horrible lyricist and his voice sucked, the catchiness of his ad-libs and the floating psychedelic earworm sound of his songs made him a phenomenon in the industry. Playboi Carti's self-titled mixtape dropped in the spring of 2017, and he instantly became a sensation. A reviewer for Hip Hop DX wrote that Playboi Carti's self-titled mixtape sounded like a glorified beat tape with ad-libs thrown on top. I don't think they could have been any more wrong. Playboi Carti's debut mixtape is full of beautiful instrumentals that feel carefree, familiar, upbeat, and mellow. Mostly thanks to Pierre Bourne, who produced the majority of the project. There are so many different vibes on the self-titled Playboi Carti mixtape. From the ethereal floating cloud rap instrumental of Location that rises over the song like the morning sun,
What? You gonna hop on my car? Billy Cool riding with Star.
to the glitchy chiptune sounds on New Choppa with A$AP Rocky,
I shoot like a king. All of these nuts in my jeans. Alexander, I'm a queen.
and Wokeuplikethis with Lil Uzi. It's a very unique sounding project. It sounds psychedelic, repetitive, upbeat, spacey. I could go on forever. There aren't any bad sounds at all. Everything feels well executed. Unless, of course, you expected Carti to start spitting bars, because that just isn't what he does. I have no clue what he was saying on most of these songs, but every time I listen to it, I walk away thinking, you know what, that was pretty good. Carti has a great sense for catchy melodies and energetic flows, and his music is fun. The self-titled mixtape is futuristic and much more well put together than most SoundCloud projects from that time. Even today, it still sounds good, and it's aged much better than most projects by his peers from 2016 or 2017. Thanks to the pretty huge success of singles from the mixtape like Magnolia and Wokeuplikethis, Carti's mixtape was considered a great success, and it got to a point where I think the criticism really did nothing but help Carti's engagement and notoriety. Sure, a lot of people were writing Playboi Carti sucks all over the internet, but enough people believed in him to the point where his next project, Die Lit, debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 just a year later. Creatively, Die Lit is pretty similar to the self-titled mixtape, with different improvements made in every area of the formula to make it bigger, more exciting, and even catchier than ever before. It was around this time that Playboi Carti had to go to the next level if he wanted to keep being somebody. You know, I think if he had just stopped right here and quit music, his discography would be 2 pretty good albums. But it's no secret that the SoundCloud scene got old pretty quick, and falling off became the expected fate for artists like Carti around 2018 to 2019. And Carti himself did also have a rough period with his career during this time for a number of different reasons. It was around this time that a lot of rap careers just fell off and died. The SoundCloud movement as a whole had a punk counterculture spirit with hard-hitting music, crazy concerts, chaotic personas, and a big youth culture around the artists and their songs. But that nonstop energy came with 2 problems. First of all, SoundCloud rap albums were terrible. Critics hated SoundCloud rap. Carti wasn't alone in getting flack for his minimal lyrics, his horrible lyrics, and his garbled flows and delivery. It wasn't just Carti who was trying to beat the allegations of being a short-lived trend riding the mumble rap wave. But secondly, there was a dark side to the SoundCloud scene too, full of drug abuse and violence and death. And it was right around the time Die Lit came out that SoundCloud artists were dying. And if the movement wasn't on the decline before, now it was really on its last legs. There are so many SoundCloud rappers who just faded away. After the deaths of X, Juice WRLD, and Lil Peep, there wasn't enough momentum left to keep the scene going. The other guys, like Rich the Kid, Ski Mask the Slump God, Famous Dex, Lil Skies, Lil Pump, their careers kind of ended as soon as they began. Sure, they still have fans. I'm not saying they're irrelevant, but their days in the spotlight are long gone. And I think Playboi Carti could have ended up like them if he hadn't completely reinvented himself between Die Lit and Whole Lotta Red. Not to say that it was easy. This period in Carti's career was full of artistic challenges, but it was clear that his intention was never to be a short trend, that he really cared about the longevity and the depth of his vision, even if some people considered him to be nothing more than a shallow, goofy mumble rapper. The thing is, a lot of Carti's best music was made during the time between Die Lit and Whole Lotta Red, but it never came out. And I think that's actually one of the things that made Carti's fan base even stronger than ever before during the long wait for his next album. Carti's second album was announced just 3 months after Die Lit, but it would be another 2.5 years before it was released. During that time, he went through multiple different eras as an artist, while at the same time not releasing any music at all. There are hundreds of Carti leaks. Hundreds of songs halfway finished or mostly finished or hardly finished at all, some of which became his most popular tracks with millions of views on YouTube despite never being released publicly. The song Kid Cudi hit #1 on the Spotify US viral chart after being uploaded to a fake profile by a leaker before it was removed the next day. Almost the whole time he was working on Whole Lotta Red, from 2018 to 2020, his music was getting leaked every month. Because of the leaks, Whole Lotta Red was remade from scratch multiple times. While most of the Carti leaks have this beautiful atmospheric ambient feel with Carti's vocals sounding more abstract and deconstructed and expressionistic than ever before, the album that actually got released sounds almost nothing like the early tracks that had been so popular in the first place. The Carti leaks were spacey and vibey, and they had a huge focus on ambience. The word floating had never applied more strongly than when you hear the beautiful samples rise over the drums at the beginning of Kid Cudi before Carti's baby voice starts jumping all over the place. The singles that Carti was on during this time, which there are only a few of, also hinted at this new evolution. On Tyler the Creator's Igor, Carti's feature on the lead single Earthquake has 750 million streams on Spotify, while also being a huge shakeup from anything he had ever done before, with tons of people commenting on his high-pitched, abstract baby voice. On Pain 1993 with Drake, he used the same high-pitched melodic baby voice again while floating on top of a quiet, subdued beat. Around the same time, he released the lead single for Whole Lotta Red called Meh, which ended up being his first song to chart in the top 40. And again, his vocals were squeaky, inhuman, and abstract. It ended up being more polarizing than anything he had done before. It was ridiculous. No one was doing anything even remotely similar to this sound at the time. The hype for Whole Lotta Red was higher than ever before. Between the beautiful spacey leaks and the crazy abstract features, people really wanted to hear that album. But when Whole Lotta Red dropped on Christmas Day in 2020, it was a completely different project. Not a single song sounded how people expected the project to sound. It was harsh, aggressive, and dark, with a gothic fantasy aesthetic, but above all that, it felt rushed. People did not like Whole Lotta Red. If you listen to a few leaks from the early versions of Whole Lotta Red, and then you compare them to a song like Jump Out the House or Stop Breathing, it's a completely different sound. baby voice was gone, replaced with a raspy scream. The floating, ambient, atmospheric instrumentals were replaced with extremely minimal beats with sharp, sawtooth synths and giant bass hits that sounded not like a futuristic psychedelic odyssey, but the boss fight from a retro vampire video game. It was completely unexpected, and a lot of people hated it. Whole Lotta Red was called unfinished and rough. People criticized Carti's performances for being choppy and lazy. It wasn't the dreamy, spacey masterpiece that people had been expecting. And the baby voice wasn't entirely gone, but most of the songs feature Carti screaming in a demonic voice over dark and gothic sounds. It wasn't what people expected, and most people hated it. But in the end, Whole Lotta Red was exactly what Carti needed to make to progress to the next level of his career. It didn't take long for people to realize that what we got wasn't an unfinished mess, but an album with enough energy to turn Playboi Carti into a living legend. Despite the nonsensical content, the unfinished and rough-sounding instrumentals, and the totally unexpected creative direction, Whole Lotta Red became a phenomenon. Not overnight, because it did get tons of hate for a while, but as time passed, it became clear that it was a very special album whose impact was growing rapidly. Personally, I think I would have liked it more if it sounded like Molly or Kid Cudi, but Whole Lotta Red is a masterpiece in its own way, and it's nothing if not inventive, creative, and original. Let me tell a quick story. Back in October of 2019, Carti did a one-off show at this big warehouse in Brooklyn, and I remember how it felt like me and every other person in New York was pulling up that night. And it was so cold, but we were all hyped up to have the greatest time. You know, finally, after 2 or 3 hours, we're let inside and the DJ is on stage for another 2 or 3 hours before Carti comes out. Within 3 songs, he threw his mic at the wall and left. At the time, everyone was like, what the fuck? We just paid $60 for the show and all we got was a 4-hour wait before Carti does 3 songs and leaves. That was terrible. But at the same time, no one was really that surprised. The expectations for Playboi Carti as an artist and a performer were pretty low. And then about 3 or 4 months ago, I went to Rolling Loud, New York, and Carti closed out the night with a massive set, and it was the most hyped up performance of the entire night. Thousands of people came just to see Carti, and I honestly felt like the parking lot was about to collapse in on itself from the pressure of everyone jumping all at the same time. By far, it was one of the most energetic performances I've ever seen. Carti is jumping all over the place, covered in makeup and costumes like a monster from hell, while his guitarist creates these demonic riffs and the pyrotechnics are exploding everywhere. It was one of the best and most unique performances I've ever seen in my entire life. And that's what Whole Lotta Red was all about. Regardless of the sound or the presentation or the quality of the album, it made Carti a one-of-a-kind figure in hip-hop with a cult following that can't be replicated by anybody else. I think music has become so corporate that there aren't a lot of cult artists left. How many artists these days have names for their fan bases and people who will follow them around to different concerts because the experience is so good? So much money goes into music marketing, but sometimes I find myself asking, who really cares about all of this? Who really loves these albums that come out and get promoted on social media and then just disappear into nothingness after a month of hype online? Even someone as big and influential as Kendrick Lamar can barely keep people talking about his latest music. Things just don't last in the conversation for nearly as long as they used to. The music industry today is a very different place than it was 3, 4, or 5 years ago. When I ask myself right now what makes an album a modern classic, there just isn't an easy way to answer that question, let alone name many albums that fit the description today. Most big-name artists are struggling to make albums right now. Maybe it's because all the big stars are losing their creativity by getting older and out of touch. Maybe it's because music marketing is going through big changes and old styles of marketing just don't work anymore. Whatever's going on, it's obvious that things are changing. Sales are down. The lifespan of a project is shorter than ever before. Look at some of the big rap albums from the last few years. You have artists like Jack Harlow getting tons of attention for making boring music. You have Kendrick Lamar waiting 5 years to drop an album that a good number of people didn't like for its subtle production or lack of excitement. You have Post Malone dropping an album with no promotion, and it ended up being the worst-selling album of his career. You've got Drake dropping the most creatively bankrupt albums he's ever made back to back to back. And Travis Scott, an artist who was once considered one of the most creative creative and original trap artist with albums like Rodeo and Astroworld, hasn't done much outside of product placements for the last 4 or 5 years. These projects that are coming out nowadays, these big albums that have all this label support and marketing push, if the album doesn't have something to set it apart and keep it in the conversation, it just disappears. There are so many albums in the industry that make a lot of noise, but it doesn't even matter because no one is passionate about the songs. I'll listen to Drake if it comes on in my daily mix. I'll sit there driving in my car, not paying any attention to what he's saying, but I'm not paying to go to his concerts. But listening to Whole Lotta Red and looking at how much passion and excitement people feel for the music, there's a movement behind it. People love it. It means something to people, and it actually brings people together in the real world. And that's a unique thing in the music industry today. If you read the comments on videos from Carti's last tour, people were saying, "This is my first concert ever. I wish I could get that feeling back. It was so transcendent and unique." Who's gonna say that about a Jack Harlow show? Who else has such a massive fan base of people who just want to hear anything he does, no matter what? Because people have that trust that whatever Carti does will be unexpectedly interesting. Whole Lotta Red was fascinating. There are no other projects even remotely similar to it in music today. It's true that it's a little long, and there are some terrible songs like the ones featuring Kanye, but songs like Stop Breathing, Jump Out the House, No Sleep, New Tank, Vamp Anthem, Sky, this is a true evolution of the trap sound. This isn't trap with a punk sample or two mixed in. This is a real fusion of two sounds, and it worked amazingly well. The instrumentals are full of fascinating little glitchy fantasy sounds and heavy 808s and sparkly sawtooth synths, and it just creates this overall whimsical, fun, exciting presentation that's half trap, half punk, and completely exciting.
When them guys outside, little bitch, you better be ready. When them guys outside, little bitch, you better be ready.
But it's not perfect, and I do get why people dislike it. The album is long, there are a ton of songs, and I understand why people would say that Carti's vocals suck. I get it. But the album made a huge impact on music, more than almost anything else around, because it's just so different. There are new and interesting ideas that feel not like a vague hint at creativity, but a fully formed new sound. The dissonance, the chaos, the catchy hooks, the aesthetics. Carti knows how to do atmosphere, and if his goal was to make a trap album that sounds like a creepy vampire castle, he pulled it off perfectly. There are no other albums that sound like this.
Push up. Push up. Push up.
Whole Lotta Red is a real album in a way that many others just aren't. The vampire aesthetic, the community, and the concerts that popped up after this record came out, for those reasons alone, I think it's one of the best albums that's come out in the past 5 years. It's a huge breath of fresh air for the fact that it got people talking alone, instead of the same old over-marketed, uninteresting crap that gets put out every month by record labels all over the industry. In a time when so much music just isn't even worth talking about, let alone listening to, an album like Whole Lotta Red can be the one to break the mold. Not just sonically, but in a way that truly pushes music forward and inspires an entire generation of people to look for more in their music. The impact of Whole Lotta Red ended up being almost as big as the album itself. There are dozens of artists that are blowing up while taking major inspiration from Carti's flows and melodies, from Ken Carson and Destroy Lonely to Yeet and Coach Ice and Ty Fontaine and many, many more.
I need my drugs, I need my love. Bitches pulling up in this sucker. I've been sipping way too much drink, I think I need a new kidney.
I think it's fair to say that Carti has quickly become one of the most influential musicians in the world today. The rise of the subgenre rage, which has also become extremely popular in underground hip-hop for the past few years, is largely attributed to the popularity of Whole Lotta Red's repetitive synths, buzzy waveforms, and hard-hitting trap drums. And I said it already, but I'll say it again. I think Whole Lotta Red definitely put Carti in the place of being one of the most important rappers around. In a world where experimentation is all but discouraged in favor of memes and trends, creating a unique experience like Whole Lotta Red is an extreme rarity. It may not have the most accessible sound, but Carti took Whole Lotta Red and turned it into one of the most exciting experiences of any album to come out in the last 5 years, and that's something most artists will never be able to do. Even apart from the sound of the album itself, which is very good on its own, its impact makes it a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. At this point, it's been almost 2.5 years since Whole Lotta Red came out, and Carti hasn't put out any music since then. That's not to say he's gone completely dark, because he did feature on 3 songs from Kanye's Donda in 2021, of which Off the Grid was considered one of the best tracks of the year, and he hasn't really needed to put out new music, because Whole Lotta Red has only become more and more popular, especially with the King Vamp Narcissist tour. But at the same time, he has had a few different projects rumored and announced that never ended up coming out, though this time there haven't been nearly as many leaks, and we don't really know what the next Carti era is going to sound like. At the end of 2021, he announced a project called Narcissist that never materialized into anything at all. After announcing a new line of merch, putting up a whole new fashion aesthetic on his Instagram, putting up billboards all over the US, and announcing a tour that never happened, it became clear that Narcissist didn't exist at all. More recently, there's another Carti album in the works called Music, which according to DJs and producers who have been working with Carti, does actually exist and should be coming out before the summer of 2023. There haven't been a whole lot of snippets from Music posted to the internet, but what we have heard points to another musical reinvention all over again. During a recent interview with XXL, Carti talked about his intentions for the project and whether or not it'll be different from his previous work. He said, "I have a lot of people that I have to take care of, so I'm here forever. The music I'm making is for forever. I've been listening to Mayhem, The Weeknd, a lot of old Atlanta trap, and some ratchet shit. Do I think sometimes I need to dumb it down? Do people think I'm too ahead? Because sometimes I feel like dumbing it down might make more money." In one snippet that features a deeper voice with more mature personal lyrics and more poppy trap production with horns and choral samples, you can clearly hear that the direction of Music very well could have a much more mainstream yet personal sound than anything Carti has made before. In a strange way, I think Playboi Carti is one of the most important artists around today, and I think he has one of the best chances at having his music remembered 20, 30, 50, or 100 years from now. No one remembers the artists who do what's expected of them. True creativity is risky, and I think there's nothing riskier than the music Carti's been making for his entire career. Having so many haters, yet so many fans at the same time is the perfect combination to create a timeless artist. Art that sells is rarely the art that lasts, and a true artist is willing to be misunderstood and made fun of when people don't yet understand the vision. Throughout his career, people have called Playboi Carti a terrible rapper, a horrible lyricist, an untalented joke of an artist, but it just doesn't matter. His albums are moving, some of the most moving music to be released in our lifetimes. Not in a deep or emotional way, not at all, but because no matter if you love Playboi Carti or hate him, you're definitely moving if he comes on. Either to turn that shit up or turn that shit off. I don't think anyone would call Playboi Carti the most perfect artist around, but he's definitely one of the best. From the creative risks he takes to the vision he executes over everything he puts out into the world, there's no one else like him. And I think that uniqueness is what it takes to be one of the very best. I'm Philip, this is Volksgeist. Thank you for watching. The darkest night and the brightest day is a 925 sterling silver necklace with a handmade enamel design in the shape of a sun rising over a night full of silver stars. And here's a reward for taking action. The first order after this video goes live gets a full refund, and the first 10 get 10% off after ordering. All orders get free shipping in the United States. And thank you for supporting my projects.